Oh yeah, let me give you a brief background. So I'm Albina Nyawera, but in the tech streets they call me Dame Techie. I've been working with Angular a year now. For about a year now, and I decided to join this forum because I wanted to know more about Angular and learn and teach people about what I've experienced or what I've come to gather. So yeah, I'm going to go straight into what I have found out so far. Hi, can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right. Hi. If my voice is shaky, it's because I'm panicking a little bit. I've never been in such a space, so bear with me again. Hi.
Okay.
So the first thing I figured out was, or the first thing I came to interact with was the view layer architecture. When we are, before we start making any application, we before we start interacting with any application, we first think about just putting things into different components. We never really think about how the components are going to interact, what components are application level, which ones are just supposed to present data, which one are going to carry services, such and such. At least in my case, I just used to put everything where I could find space. So that being said, I came to discover that there are smart and representational components. Um, I'm going to take you through a small code snippet of what it looks like when you put all your code in one space. So this is a small home page that is supposed to display a list of courses. It's also supposed to take user events like a click where a user selects a lesson, sees and then he gets to the lesson description gets displayed, the amount of time that the lesson is supposed to take. Um, there is also now the logic that implements pipes and it yeah implements as a pipe and a lesson service that displays all the lessons. So despite the fact that this is a very small application, having all that logic in one space is cumbersome because the data cannot be reused in other spaces. You'll have to keep on repeating the same logic over and over again. And that is where dividing your components into smart and dumb components or presentational components comes in. So what are smart components? uh, so smart components are the components that handle data. Instead of having one component fetching data from services or interfaces and then displaying the data, we divide them into two. The smart components are, they fetch data from the services, they track the state of the application, and then take care of events and then uh, transfer the data or send data to dumb components through property binding and dictate like what state, the changing of the state. Yeah, the changing of the states. So these ones, so to sum up, they're usually top level components that are assigned related dumb components. They are where you inject your services and dependencies. They handle all the logic and they help with refactoring. the application. So before I'd shown you a small code snippet of a component that handles everything. So we're going to take what we've seen here and place the logic aspect of it into a smart component. So here we have a smart component. So the smart component does not display any data. It just holds the logic aspect. So we have a smart component here that checks the lists we had displayed in the home screen, the home, and then we inject a service into it so that it can display the list of the lessons. Yeah, but it doesn't display them. So its work is going to send this data to a dumb component that is going now to display that data. So on to my next point, which is the what are presentational or dumb components. So these ones, the dumb components, their role is to fetch data. Oh, it's not to fetch, sorry, it's not to fetch data, but just display it. They get data through the input and output directives, and within them, because they're just receiving data and communicating with the smart components, that is where they get to handle the UI logic. So when you're using dumb components, you don't inject services since it's just supposed to represent data. So we had this this smart component. Now we're going to see the dumb components. So this one now, it takes the list through the ng4 directive. It checks for the list of lessons. If the user clicks on a particular lesson, they get the lesson, the description, and its duration. Yeah. So here, with the using the input at input directive, it receives an array of lessons, and using the output, it communicates with the smart components. Depending on what the user intends to see, it listens to the event emitter and displays what the user intends to see. Yeah. So that is the role of the dumb components. So given the fact that they just receive data from the smart components, they are easily reusable across the different parts of the application, which is a plus for us, which means that if there's a logic that's supposed to be repeated over and over, you can easily put it in one component and use it across the rest of the application. Yeah, so any questions on my first point? Raise your hands. Hello?
Hey guys, feel free by the way to ask questions. If you have any questions.
Please.
Okay, if there's none, then it's okay. I think we can continue.
Yeah, on to my second point, which is abstraction. Based on the research I was doing, apparently people don't use a lot of abstraction. I don't know why, given that this is an object-oriented language or framework. Abstraction makes work much easier for us because it reduces the redundancy of code. It helps us write drier code. Yeah, so abstraction is a way where duties are delegated to an interface or a class, and once the duty is given to a specific adapter an adapter, it's easily inherited by other parts of the application. When you're working on any application, We have vendor libraries, we have third-party APIs, or we are making different HTTPS requests. They're old functions, and in some events, the logic of an application will change, but the expected results remains the same. That is why it's important to use abstractions in your application, so that in the event that there's changes are expected within your application or updates needs to be made, instead of making revisions across the entire platform, you can just change the implementation of an interface. Yeah, and then inherit it across other aspects of the application. Um, so um, to sum that up, the use of adapters, the benefits of it is reduces the redundancies in code, thus drier code. It helps the logic to maintain, like, the methods that are easily changeable, or yeah, if you are meant to change a method or a common property, it's easier to do it within one space instead of changing it across multiple, yeah, parts of your application. Uh-huh. So next is the type system. Um, the basics of TypeScript, it's actually called TypeScript. And so we are expected to use the types within our applications. We are all familiar with the different types. We have the Boolean, strings, numbers, and arrays. And it's important to implement those types across the application. So the one mistake that people tend to make is to use the type any. And once you use the type any within the application, it makes development way harder because it makes room for runtime problems, since the application cannot identify the correct interface. It also makes the DTOs, the data transfer objects, when working within a team, to be very difficult, because it's important that you also put in mind the other developers you're going to work with, the when when you are when you are uh, assigning types, ndio mtu ajue what's happening. Yeah, I also found out that with types, it's easier to uh, check your check your errors. It's easier for you to identify where errors are when you know the types. Also, you can enable the TypeScript strict compiler option, so that there are no null values. Like, your application doesn't go into production where the null values that could make the application develop runtime errors in the long run. Yeah. So yeah, that's about it on the type system. Aha. So the next point is on your tests. This is a place where I have challenges on. The running tests can be a little challenging, but it's very important. When I was doing my research on running tests, one of the things that I discovered was the RIO method, return on investments. That you should ensure that the amount of time you spend on your application, on creating an application, you give the same intensity on your tests. So there are some tests. parts of your application that require 100% of code coverage when you're testing them, such as the services, and the pure functions, the helpers, the pipes, yeah, and the business logic. You give it 100% because you don't want your functions breaking or the functionality failing to deliver as expected. There are also other aspects that you give relatively lower intensity because their tests they're not as valuable. Like for example, UI tests do not receive the same intensity as your service as the services, as the tests run on your services, because again of the return on investments. So there are usually different types of tests: the unit tests, the integration tests, and UI tests. I'm going to take you guys through each of them so that you can understand how they work. So the unit testing focus on the logic aspect of the application. When you're unit testing, you could handle it in two ways. You could do isolated testing or you could do shallow testing. Isolated testings are those that you identify a business logic and test it by itself. Like, uko na function hapo, like you make sure that it works 100% through different tests. And then the shallow testing is when you run a test on a component, like on a template, but you don't render the child. So what I realized is that the here with the shallow testing, we use the no error schema. What's it? Yeah, a no error schema terminology that ignores the unknown tags. If there are unknown tags within the template or if there are children that are imported but not used, it tends to ignore such redundant or unnecessary code while testing. So yeah, with the unit testing, as discussed, it should cover 100% because these are your logic lies. This is the backbone of your application. Then there is the integration testing. These ones are where you test two or more components together. These ones are mostly used with smart components where dependencies need to be implemented across multiple children or DOM components. With this, the dependencies that are shared can be tested together all at once using the integration testing. Though in this space, you should mock out the HTTP client because you should mock out the HTTP client aspect since it could be giving different responses for different user activities. Then there is the end-to-end testing, which is done when compiling the entire application. This one is mostly to improve it's used to improve the performance or optimizing the application. Here you test the back end, the browser automation, automizing APIs. There are tools that you could use. I came across Selenium, but I've not gotten a chance to use it, so I can't give you a lot of information on that. Hiyo ni homework. go do homework on Selenium and how it works with the end-to-end testing. Okay. On to my next point, the interactive architecture. So when you're using the using of reactive architecture. When using reactive architecture is when you separate your business and UI logic or your reads from your writes and operate them separately. So for instance, in this image, we have a state. It could be a current state of an application. For example, a button. Let's say a button. Once a user clicks on a button, it changes. It records that user activity and passes what is expected via an observable, and then that is taken through a smart component that then feeds the data into a dump component using the at input directive, and then the dump components sends back a signal to the smart components through the facet, and then it updates the state of what the user expects. So here we see like the data goes through one side, and then the action is handled by the other part of the application. So here we make use of observables that handle asynchronous or synchronous operations. Here, for example, you can define a custom event that sends an observable output of data from a child to a parent, and then the child takes the event and presents the data to the user. We can also use async pipes to ensure that the triggers are automatically unsubscribed once an event is handled. From the use of async pipes in this case is important since it returns the latest value emitted, so it reduces the runtime of the app. Since changes are identified immediately. The next point is the use of responsive styling. I think we've all come across this, where your application needs to be responsive on a desktop, a tablet, or a smartphone. So on this point, I think that the current Angular framework provides libraries like the Angular material that makes your work much easier. So instead of hard coding your CSS and styling, you can make use of layout libraries or UI libraries or layout frameworks like Bootstraps or Flex layout. So instead of really hard coding your UI, you can make use of this styling resources that automatically make your design responsive. On to my next point, collaboration. This is one thing that I've come to learn the hard way. When we are collaborating, we do not only interact with developers, we get to interact with UX UI designers, we interact with BAs, we also interact with developers that have different, like front end, we'll have to interact with back end developers. So yeah, the collaboration aspect of it is very important for a product to come out as expected, or to solve the problem that it's supposed to solve. So when it comes to collaboration, the first thing that we're supposed to do is to create a value stream map, like what's the bigger picture, what is expected of a product, and then based on that you work backwards and create timelines and divide tasks based on what is expected of team players. Also came across something called a push and pull system. A push system refers to a system where people work individually. For example, if I'm a UX UI designer, I finish my job, give it to a front end. The front end implements what the design shows. The backend works individually. The BA gives you the business logic and then leaves it at that, where everyone works independently. However, we have another system that's called the pool system, where you pool all the resources, human and technical. You get to interact with like the business, with the BA, and they give you like clarification on what the product's supposed to look like, or the definition of tasks. You can also get to work with developers, where you implement things like pair programming to ease the development process. You could also work with the QA so that you can get to understand better what feature is expected and how it should be tested, so that if there should be any regression in testing, then the collaboration process becomes much easier. So we should all try to implement a pull system where you collaborate efforts from those guys that you're working with, so that you can prevent or eliminate any bottlenecks. It makes your work easier as a developer as well. The last point, is it? Yes, this is my last point. Optimizing of performance and load time. I was recently working on an application, and it scored a D at Gmetrics, and that's the first time I got to interact with optimizing the performance of an application. So there are usually okay, so when I talk about load time, I mean the time it takes for a user, for data to be presented to a user. So according to research, like according to Google, when an application or your work takes more than 3 seconds to load, 40% of people will abandon the site. They won't get to know more about what you are providing or the solution you're providing. Wanakwanga wameboeka in advance, because they're expecting the same 3-second time lag to continue. So it's important that we across features such as lazy loading, or reducing your or keeping track of your bundle size, and keeping track of your bundle size so that you can reduce it and make sure that the performance and load time of your application are optimized. So to do that, to optimize the performance and load time, we optimize the size of the bundle, we optimize the loading of the static content, and any third-party libraries that you are going to be using. For the Angular applications, when I ran my my test when I was optimizing my load time and performance, I came across the different bundles that I really didn't know what they meant for a minute. I came across the runtime, the polyfills, the main, the common, and the lazy loaded bundles. So I can take you through each of them so I can tell you what I discovered under each. So the runtime bundles, they are the ones that contain the Webpack loader, zile zenye zinakuja na the Angular CLI. Those ones come in build. Sorry. They're also the polyfills bundles that make sure that the app has the desired browser support. But with differential loading, the polyfills do not need to be loaded within the browser. So yeah, those ones you can make them smaller, but they have little significance since they're only ensuring that the application is supported by the browser. Then there is the main bundle that contains your vendor libraries like the node modules. It also contains the source code that is not lazy loaded yet. So this is where you find your biggest bundle size. This is the one that needs to be optimized mostly. And then there's the common bundle that contains the bundles that are shared between the lazy loaded modules, yeah, and your main bundles. Then lastly, we have the lazy loaded bundles, which are the bundles that are only loaded while needed. Either they can be loaded immediately after an application is initialized or upon request by a user. So once you handle your bundle sizes and reduce it to a significant, mostly below 500 MBs for your main, like it shouldn't get to a GB because then it reduces your it increases your load time and thus reduces your performance. Yeah, that is what I discovered. I am open for questions. It's your Q&A time. Feel free to interact with me. Thank you.
Okay, guys. Please feel free to raise up your hands and then unmute yourself so that you can ask any question with regards to this. And if I'm not wrong, I don't think it's just tied to this. If you have anything else, question related to best coding process for Angular, you can definitely ask. Yeah, Winnie. Hi, Winnie.
Hi, Wayne. I have a question concerning the styling libraries. What's your view on using PrimeNG as a styling library?
Sorry, could you ask the question again?
Oh, I'm asking, what's your view on the speak? I have a question for the speaker. I'm inquiring what's her view on using PrimeNG as a styling library.
Hi Winnie. I think I think you can, as long as the library is making your work easier when it comes to styling. I personally haven't interacted with PrimeNG, but if it makes your styling process easier instead of hardcore or writing your code from scratch using CSS, as long as the library provides the responsiveness or bundles that make your work easier, then it's okay.
Okay.
Also, just something to add on to that. For me, I usually say it's good first of all for you to understand the basics for stylings and all that as much as you can, write raw CSS so that by the time you're now using other probably frameworks or third-party libraries for styling, you already know what exactly is happening behind the scenes so that, whenever you're given a project and you're told to like, okay, we're having this bug, like for example, this is not aligning well, and you don't really know what is happening, it might be something to do with the margins, but you don't really know how the margins look like. So it becomes a problem. But it's very, very important to at least, get to understand the basics, and then we can now move on forward to like, working with third-party libraries and frameworks. But yeah, sure. Okay, I think we have another hand up from Ken. Yes, Ken. I'm not sure if it's me or okay. Can you guys hear Ken or maybe okay.
No, I can't hear Ken.
Okay. Okay. Hi Ken. Okay. Seems Ken might be having issues with the mic. All right. If anyone else who has a question, probably has to wait for Ken solve any issues that
Can you
he may
hear
be
me now?
having. Yes, yes. All good now.
Okay. Okay, sorry for that. So I was saying that I have enjoyed the presentation so far, especially on testing. I hadn't really given much thought into Angular and testing, but now it's definitely looking like something worth getting into. So I have a question on optimizing. When using something like Angular material, you get to import. So what I normally do is I have a separate module, a sharing module, where you import everything you're going to need in the application from Angular material, and whichever module you're going to need it in, I import the shared one. But I read somewhere that it's not it's not the most optimized like approach, because eventually you're going to have these modules that you've used in another module in another module, but you're not going to use them in another one. So I was wondering, how would you approach it? Yeah, just to make it more optimized.
Wayne, help me there.
Sorry guys, I'm having a bit of issues with the internet. Ken, could you just reiterate the question once again? Don't mind.
Okay, no problem. I'm saying about Angular material. When you're using Angular material and you need to import these modules so that you can use them like in the whole application, you have different modules and you have one shared module for using the Angular material.
Yeah.
Now you import this in whichever one that you need, but you might find that in one you don't need all of them.
Yeah.
Like, how would you approach that just to make sure that you're not importing everything that you don't need?
Okay. So one thing that happens when you have something like a shared module, from what I know from personal perspective, is probably you already know the concept of tree shaking, right? So whenever you're going to be using, let's say, a particular module, let's say if it's a matte button module from Angular material, whenever you bootstrap your app, like when the app starts, right, you're only going to interact with that module or component when you reach to that component, like when you exactly load that particular component. And what the shared module does is it does what is called tree shaking, in the sense that it's only going to load what exactly you need. Then immediately you're done with that particular component and say, maybe you're moving to another view or something, then if those modules or those Angular material components are not in that particular page, they're kind of like not loaded, and those which are supposed to be loaded in that particular page are the ones going to be loaded. So it's all about tree checking.
Okay. So thanks.
Yeah, and the beauty of it is that when you have a shared module, you don't have to import everything on the app module file, because with the app module file, like everything is just loaded up onto the application. But whenever you have that shared module, it's only where you need it, it's when it's going to be loaded. Yeah. Anyone else has another question? Anyone who probably has I don't know, comment or a question? Anyone?
Hello.
Yeah, hi Collins.
Hi, Wayne. So this is my first, actually first session I've ever attended. My name is Collins, and I want to congratulate Beth. It was such an engaging session, and you did good. So looking forward to more of this, and such a community, such a great community. So thank you.
Thank you for your feedback, Collins.
Thank you, Collins. Oh, just another question, right? Albina, what's your take on the use of things like ng containers? Hi, Albina. Can you hear me?
Hi. Oh. Hi.
Yeah. What's your take on the use of ng containers?
I think they are important. They are important since they increase the performance of the application. Since the browser, once you use ng container, you end up rendering less elements, but those that you're going to render are going to be the valuable assets the valuable assets. So you get to get a cleaner DOM and easier styling. For example, the use of ngIfs with other structural directives. So it makes you just display what's wanted other than everything at once. That's my take.
Right. Yeah, that's actually true, like what you've mentioned. Like having a cleaner DOM is very, very important. So of course, if you give an example, if you're having like a for loop, right, and let's say your data is coming from an API endpoint, right, and you are receiving your data as an observable, ng containers will help you, whenever you want to subscribe and unsubscribe for them data. And if you have things inside an ng container, the content there is only going to be rendered in the DOM only if and when those content are actually available. So that is like if you have a list of students and maybe the observable is not there, or maybe it's empty or something like that, it's never going to render it. But if it does have something, that's when it's going to be rendered. Yeah, and it definitely improves your app's performance. Yeah. Yeah, and I think other ways of, just to add on through my personal experience working with Angular, is that, yeah, clean code is very, very important. As Albina mentioned, if you separate your logic from your template, it's going to be much easier for you even to maintain it. Or for anyone else who's joining your team, they're able to know like, okay, in this particular folder, we have shared components, for example, or in this particular module, we have these core modules and all that. And it's very, very important to have that kind of architecture where have things separated or at the same time they're well structured, so that even if you yourself want to come back in like in 2 years' time, you'll be able to understand what exactly you were doing, because we all know that you reach at a point where you don't even know what exactly you've written, and it can become an issue. And another thing is, I think when it comes to methods, functions, models, and all that, it's also very, very important to use good naming conventions. So for example, if it's get users or get clients and all that, you make sure you use the most appropriate ones, because it's going to really help even for you to understand your code. And also, if you're working in a team, you'll be able, your team members will also understand what exactly is happening. Because like in our company, Sky Garden, there were some points where we were having projects that were not really well structured. So what we had to do was, it's not really tearing everything down, but then it's creating probably a separate project in which now we can structure the code carefully, and so that it can also be well maintained later on. And this makes it easier and makes it easier for you to trace where exactly you're coming from. So like what Albina was mentioning, you having adapters and all that, having facades, having a step management system, it makes it much easier for you to really know where exactly the problem is coming from. And for step management, you can go the normal way of using behavioral subjects. Or if you want, you can use is it NGRX? Yes, NGRX. We also have content, by the way, on NGRX. If you want to know about step management, we have content on it. And those are some of the things that you get to learn as a developer, as an Angular developer. You don't have to be an expert at it. Personally, I usually say, like, I'm always learning new stuff as days go by. It's only when you continue doing it over and over again, you become much more comfortable with it. Because I remember I used to be very, very scared of observables, like a long time, because I was like, because you can read everywhere and always tell you like, don't subscribe in a component, only subscribe in a template. And for me, I was like, I don't know what's happening here. Like, how do you do that? Then when I came to understand that you can actually use a sync pipe, and what you can do in the component is that, just create a property or a variable where you're going to just kind of like dump the information in, and then call on that particular property in your template and use a sync pipe, and then it does everything for you automatically. So for me, that was a great thing. And yeah, I think apart from that, if you don't have any questions, any comments, I'd like to bring the meeting to a close. Joy, are you here?
Hi, Wayne.
Oh,
Hi.
Hi. Alex, did you want to ask something?
Mine is just but a comment for the person who asked about Angular material. Lazy loading is one thing that will help with reducing the bundle size. So that's one way to go about it. And also, as we are looking into best practices, I know in the learning process, most of us tend to work with examples, go to Stack Overflow, check questions, copy code. For starters, it can help you solve issues, but I found out the best way to learn when you are stuck in a certain topic, it's good to check on Stack Overflow, but the best way to learn about something is go into the documentation. It may be difficult in the beginning, but by and by you will eventually get it, and that increases your level of confidence even when you meet or rather when you're thrown into a complex project. Once you are able to navigate your way around documentation, be it Angular or whatever component or module, it becomes easier for you as you go along, and you will find out that even when you have to learn something new,
it becomes very easy for you. So avoid Stack Overflow as much as you can, unless it's a quick fix that you need, but always go back to the documentation. That will always be the best way to go. Learn through there, and don't get tired. You will get it eventually, and everyone at their own level has their own difficulties and those things that you don't want to face. At the beginning, you will face these things of you don't know what is this, how will it work, but eventually by and by you also find other bigger things that you also need to break them down into smaller issues. And then some things that it's important to learn early on. There's something that we call the solid principles. As you're beginning, learn those things early enough. You'll avoid getting into the mess of spaghetti code, whereby you want to code everything in one class. You have a class with like 5,000 lines. You're able to break up your code into smaller functions. And then when you come to the things that our speaker was speaking about, testing, it becomes very easy for you to figure out how to do testing. You also reduce a lot of dependency and tight coupling. So if you learn some of these patterns before you get into a certain kind of mentality or presupposition, it will make your learning curve and your developer life painless. But if you don't do some of these things, time has proven that they are good practices to learn very early on. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point on documentation. Because you've probably heard that, sometimes as developers, we always ask questions, but then you'll find those answers in the documentation. So always Google it and check the documentation. And yeah, okay. Hi, Steve. Do you have a question or a comment? Yes, Steve.
Oh, before Steve goes, Wayne.
Yeah.
For those guys who are looking to learn RxJS, look into somebody called Deborah Kurata. She has got very nice tutorials when it comes to RxJS and reactive data streams. It will help you get that understanding of how the RxJS works when it comes to data streams and the async pipe. You'll be able to figure out how easily you can be able to use that in your apps. Yeah.
Very true. Very true. Yeah. Anyone else has a question or comment before I hand it over to Joy? Okay. Joy, do you have anything to share? Or
Hi, Wayne. Hi, Beth. Sorry, it's not Beth. Hi, Albina. How are you?
Hi. I'm fine.
That was an awesome session. Actually, it's very courageous of you to do a presentation on your own, so congrats. Okay, there's this question I've been meaning to ask. So someone from the audience is asking, is it good practice to subscribe to observables in services? And if it's not, could you explain why? Did I break?
No, kindly repeat the question, please.
Okay, so is it good to subscribe to observables in services? And if it's not, then could you give a reason why?
Based on what I discovered, I also, like Wayne said, I'm not very friendly with observables, but what I discovered, when observables make your work easier, they reduce the redundancy in your code, and so does the services. So I think it's good practice But when it's like synchronized applications, okay, honestly, Wayne, help me, please.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. So I'd say, of course, when you start off, like getting to understand Angular, you'll definitely be tempted to subscribe to the data coming in asynchronously from an endpoint or anything. But it's usually say that it's better for you to subscribe it in the template. The reason why that is because your services should just do one thing and only one thing. That is just fetch the data. When it comes to subscribing, leave that to the template because there's a chance that your data will be changing based on what you exactly need when it comes to the UI. And that is like making use of RxJS operators like maps, tabs, um, distinct, until, those kind of operators, because you would want to leave that work of subscribing to the components themselves, and that is inside the UI. Or when you want to change it, let's say move it from one array to another, you can always map it in the component file. But then when it comes to subscribing, subscribe it inside the template using an async file. Yeah. If anyone else has another take, please do share. We're here to learn. So, yeah.
Yeah, so and if I was to add on to that, I think in my early beginning times when I started using Angular, I also fell victim to the same. I would ultimately try to subscribe inside the service, and it makes you do things that you're not supposed to do inside the service. The service starts to think on behalf of the component, of which the service should not be thinking. It should just become more or less a point where you share data to different things. So you end up making things so complex in the service so that it has to cater for components. In tandem or in turn, you start having lots of high coupling between the service and the component. They have to be with each other wherever the component goes. Now, the beauty about using RxJS, as you have mentioned, make use of the operators to get what you need from that API call. Another thing is to make use of interfaces. You can be able to create your own data types. Let us call them that for lack of a better description. You can be able to describe your own types using interfaces, and then you can be able to narrow down your service output using those interfaces. So you sort of have a contract between the service and the API so that you're sure you always get what you want. I think there is a time when you spoke about that, there is a time you had spoken about the APIs and the services and using interfaces as a contract. And then now when you pass the final observable that you pass to the component is ready to consume that specific type that you have passed to that component. So you avoid a lot of hassle. Don't subscribe in the service. It will give you lots of problems. It also brings issues with testability. Testing that service will be hard. It will become harder by the day. So try as much as possible for observables, avoid subscribing even at the component level. Subscribe if only there is no any other option. At best, always try to use the async pipe. It will take care of cleaning up after the component has been destroyed. You don't have to worry about memory leaks and the likes. So try to use the async pipe as best as you can. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you very much,
thank
Alex.
you.
Okay. Yeah, Joy.
Thank you. Thank you guys for also showing up for this session this late night. Means a lot. I hope we've learned a lot. So see you for the next session as well. Maybe I'll be hosting.
Yeah, definitely. So probably if you don't know, Joy Leader is our new colleague for Angular Kenya. So in case you won't see me, you always see Joy. So and I hope to see you guys again for the next session. Please always be on the lookout. Just check on our Twitter. We usually post our sessions there whenever we have them. And if you want to, of course, check out this content probably later on. Always check on our YouTube channel. We're going to upload the video. And a big thank you to Albina for taking the time to take us through this session. Yeah, as Joy mentioned, it may not be easy to present alone, but it takes a lot of courage. And thank you for this. And we really hope to see you next for the next session, for another session, sorry. And yeah, if you guys also be interested in doing a talk with regards to Angular or anything in Angular, please feel free to reach out to me or Joy or the Angular Kenya Twitter account. Just always reach out to it, and we'll be able to try and see where we can slot you for a session. Because the whole idea is to have everyone share their knowledge, share their experience as developers, because we're all together in this. Yeah, Angular is not as easy as it may sound, but trust me, like the fruits that come out of the hard work are really worth it. So yeah, thank you once again for taking the time to attend this session, and wishing you all a good evening, and see you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye bye.